She fought with a millionaire, and he shocked everyone with his proposal. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. The morning rush at Harper Street Cafe was louder than usual. Steam hissed from espresso machines, spoons clinked against porcelain, and rain tapped steadily on the windows. Lena Brooks, 27, moved fast behind the counter, her messy ponytail falling loose as she tried to keep up with orders. She had not slept well. Her rent was due, her mother's hospital bills were piling up, and the manager had just called in sick. "Excuse me." A calm male voice cut through the noise. A tall man in a simple gray hoodie stood at the counter. "This coffee tastes like dishwater." Lena froze, cup still in hand. The cafe went quiet for a beat. She turned toward him, jaw tightening. "I am sorry, sir, but maybe you ordered dishwater by mistake," she said before she could stop herself. A few customers gasped. The man blinked, clearly taken aback. "I did not mean to be rude," he said, his tone even. "Well, it sure sounded that way," she snapped. The tension hung between them like static. Then, without another word, the man reached for his wallet. He placed a crisp $20 bill on the counter, twice the cost of the drink, and said softly, "Keep the change." As he turned to leave, Lena noticed the way his eyes lingered on her. Not angry, but curious, almost amused. Her coworker whispered, "Lena, do you realize who that was?" "No," she muttered, still shaking. "Some picky customer with an attitude. Or maybe," her friend said under her breath, "the quiet investor who owns this cafe chain." Lena laughed it off, but her stomach twisted. That night, while wiping tables after closing, she found a folded napkin near the register. In neat handwriting, it read, "Sometimes honesty is stronger than sweetness. AJ." She frowned, holding it under the warm light. Who was AJ? The customer from this morning? Or just a random note someone left behind? Outside, rain still fell, and a city bus splashed through puddles as she stepped into the night. She had no umbrella, just her thin denim jacket and a head full of questions. The neon glow from the cafe sign reflected off the wet pavement, and for a brief second, she caught her own reflection-tired eyes, a smudge of coffee on her sleeve, and something else, pride. Maybe she had gone too far. Maybe she had not. But for once, she had not swallowed her words to please someone richer, louder, or more powerful. What Lena did not know was that the man she had fought with, AJ Carter, was not just a demanding customer. He was a millionaire who had been testing the integrity of ordinary people in his own businesses. And the woman who had just stood up to him without fear would soon change his entire life. The next morning, the sky above the city was the color of cold steel. Lena's alarm rang at 6, and she woke with that familiar heaviness in her chest. Her apartment smelled faintly of instant coffee and laundry detergent. She tied her hair back, buttoned her faded uniform, and grabbed her worn canvas bag before stepping into the drizzle. At the cafe, everything looked the same, but something felt different. The napkin note from last night sat tucked safely in her apron pocket. She told herself it meant nothing, just a stranger's attempt at kindness, but part of her could not stop thinking about the handwriting. It was firm, confident, elegant, someone who did not rush. By noon, the place was packed. Lena moved between tables, balancing trays and smiles she did not feel. She was wiping a counter when the doorbell chimed. A man stepped inside, shaking off the rain. Same height, same calm energy. For a heartbeat, she thought it was him, the man from yesterday, but this one wore a suit, perfectly tailored. He gave her a polite nod and walked toward the back corner where the manager was waiting. Her friend Emma whispered, "You see that guy? That is AJ Carter. He runs the Urban Cup Foundation. Big deal around here." Lena's stomach twisted. AJ Carter. The same initials from the napkin. But she told herself it was just coincidence. Millionaires did not wander into small coffee shops twice in 2 days. Later that evening, when the cafe lights dimmed and the last customers had left, Lena's phone buzzed with a new email. The subject line read, "Community Project Interview, Urban Cup Foundation." Her eyes widened. She had applied months ago, hoping for a junior assistant role in their outreach program, but never received a reply. Now the message said, "We would like to meet with you tomorrow at 10 a.m. AJ Carter." She reread it 3 times. It had to be a mistake. Maybe they confused her with someone else. Still, she printed the email, pressed her uniform and packed her sketchbook, her quiet dream, filled with designs for cozy cafes she would never own. The next morning, the office tower was nothing like Harper Street Cafe. Marble floors gleamed under soft golden light, and glass walls reflected her anxious face as she waited by reception. Her sneakers squeaked on the tile. She felt out of place, small but determined to stay. When the elevator doors opened, the same man from the cafe walked out, this time in a navy suit, holding a cup of coffee. Her coffee. The paper sleeve had her handwriting on it. "Enjoy the real thing." He smiled faintly. "Good morning, Miss Brooks. I believe we have met before." Lena froze. You are the customer from yesterday?" "In a way, yes," he replied. "But I was not entirely honest about who I am." He gestured for her to follow him into a sleek conference room overlooking the city. "I like to visit my cafes without the filter of my title. It helps me see how people treat others when they think no one is watching." Lena's face flushed. "So you were testing me?" "I was observing," he said gently. "And I saw someone who stands for what she believes in. That is exactly the kind of person I want on my team." He slid a folder across the table. Inside was an offer letter for a community outreach position, temporary, 3 months, renewable upon performance. Lena looked at the salary line and blinked. It was more than she made in 6 months at the cafe. "This is a mistake," she said quietly. "I'm just a waitress." "You are exactly who we need," he said. "Someone who knows what real honesty tastes like." Her hands trembled as she signed the paper. As she left his office, she caught his reflection in the glass, calm, composed, but with a hint of a smile. For the first time, Lena wondered if maybe the world was not punishing her, but giving her a second chance disguised as a test. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city shimmered under weak sunlight, and somewhere high above, A.J. Carter watched her cross the street with her head held high, unaware that their story had only just begun. For the first few weeks, Lena could hardly believe where she was working. The Urban Cup Foundation occupied the top 3 floors of the glass building downtown, filled with sunlight, modern art, and the smell of fresh roasted coffee. Every day she rode the elevator up, clutching her notebook, trying to convince herself that she belonged there. Her job was simple on paper: assist with a community project that supported small cafes and independent baristas. But to Lena, it felt like walking into another world. The people spoke in calm, confident tones, their clothes pressed and perfect. She felt like a stain in a sea of polish. Yet A.J. Carter never treated her that way. He greeted her each morning with quiet respect, sometimes with the faintest smile that made her heart skip before she could stop it. He asked for her opinion in meetings, listened when she spoke, and once even laughed when she spilled her coffee over a proposal draft. "You have passion," he said that day. "It is messy, but it is real. Do not lose that." She started staying late, helping design workshops for local cafe owners. Often, A.J. stayed too. They would sit across from each other, papers spread out, the hum of the city fading into the glass walls around them. One evening, as thunder rolled outside, the power flickered. Lena startled. He reached for the small lamp on his desk and switched it on. "Better?" he asked. She nodded, her pulse racing for no reason she could name. "You do not seem like the type to work this late," she said softly. He smiled. "Neither do you." Moments like that began to blur the line between admiration and something deeper. But Lena reminded herself who he was. Her boss, a millionaire, a man from another universe. Still, she could not help noticing how he paused to hold the door for interns, how he learned every janitor's name, how he sometimes looked at her like he was trying to remember something long forgotten. One Friday night, they visited a rundown neighborhood where an old cafe owner had applied for a grant. The rain had returned, steady and gray, soaking through Lena's coat as she stood beside A.J. under the awning. The woman who owned the place was in tears, thanking them for listening to her story. As they walked back to the car, Lena said, "You really care about people, do you not?" He looked at her then, a softness in his eyes. "I do. But I do not think I have met anyone who reminded me why I should." "Until you." Lena felt her breath catch. She turned away, pretending to adjust her umbrella. The silence that followed was charged, not awkward, but fragile. The next morning, the city woke up to headlines that made her blood run cold. A gossip blog had posted photos of her and A.J. Peen, leaving the neighborhood cafe together, with the caption, "Barista turned CEO's secret companion." The article called her a mystery woman, hinting that she had used pity to climb into A.J.'s world. By the time she arrived at the office, whispers were already circling. A.J.'s assistant avoided her eyes. The receptionist offered a forced smile. At her desk, an email awaited her. Suspension pending internal review. Her hands trembled as she walked to his office. The door was closed, voices murmuring inside. When it opened, she saw him with the board of directors. Their expressions were cold. He tried to speak, but she cut him off. "Do not defend me, Mr. Carter. I know how this looks." "Lena, please," he began, but she shook her head. "I should never have come here. I do not belong in your world." She left the building before he could stop her. Outside, the wind carried the smell of rain and asphalt. She walked aimlessly, her heart breaking with every step. That night she returned to her small apartment, stripped of the confidence she had started to build. The napkin note that once gave her strength now felt like a cruel joke. Meanwhile, high above the city, AJ stood by his office window, watching the storm swallow the skyline. His reflection looked back at him, controlled, polished, untouchable, but his chest ached. For the first time, he realized his experiment had cost him something real. He had tested the honesty of others for years, but now he was the one being tested. And this time, he was failing. Days passed in silence. Lena did not return to the foundation, and the city seemed to move on without her. She picked up extra shifts at a small diner on the east side, the kind of place that smelled like burnt toast and old coffee. The regulars did not know her name, and that was exactly how she wanted it. Every time she wiped down a counter, she thought about AJ, his calm voice, his steady gaze, the way he had believed in her when no one else did. But now, believing hurt. She convinced herself that he had moved on easily, that men like him never had to explain themselves. Still, each night she caught herself staring at the folded napkin he had once written on. She could not throw it away. Across town, AJ was fighting a war inside his own company. The board demanded answers about the scandal. His legal team advised silence, but silence was the very thing that was destroying her. Every article painted Lena as a gold digger, a manipulative waitress who had seduced her boss for money. AJ knew it was a lie, and yet every time he tried to speak, someone warned him it would only make things worse. That Friday, he made his decision. He opened his laptop and drafted a speech for the upcoming charity gala, the event where investors, press, and city officials would gather. For years, he had used that stage to announce business ventures. This time, he would use it to tell the truth. When the night came, the ballroom shimmered with gold lights and quiet chatter. Lena was not invited, but her coworker Emma insisted she attend anyway. "You deserve to be there," Emma said, handing her a spare ticket. "Just listen to what he has to say before you decide to disappear forever." Lena hesitated until the last moment, standing in the back corner of the hall, dressed simply, her heart pounding. The stage lights dimmed. AJ. Carter walked to the microphone in his black suit, his face calm but his voice steady with emotion. "Tonight was supposed to be about numbers," he began. "Growth, success, expansion. But none of that means anything if we lose sight of honesty." The crowd quieted. Cameras flashed. A few weeks ago, the world saw a photograph and believed a story that was not true. The woman in that picture did not chase wealth. "She reminded me what integrity looks like." Lena's breath caught. People began to whisper, turning toward her corner. AJ continued. "That woman is the reason the Urban Cup Foundation exists as it does today. Her courage and her kindness are worth more than every dollar I will ever earn." He stepped away from the podium and walked directly toward the crowd. The music faded. Reporters scrambled to follow him. When he reached her, the room fell silent. Lena's eyes filled with tears. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "Because silence is cowardice," he said softly. "And because I owe you the truth." He turned back to the audience. "Her name is Lena Brooks. She stood up to me when she thought I was just another rude customer. She told me the truth when no one else dared. That is the kind of honesty I want by my side for the rest of my life." Gasps rippled through the room. AJ reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "I tested others for their integrity," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "But Lena tested mine." He opened the box to reveal a silver ring that gleamed under the chandelier. Lena stepped back, speechless. "You do not have to do this," she whispered. "I want to," he said. "Not as your boss, not as a millionaire, as a man who finally understands what love should mean." The crowd erupted in applause, camera flashes exploding like fireworks. For a long moment, Lena stood frozen, trembling. Then she looked at him, the man who had turned her world upside down, and slowly nodded. He slipped the ring onto her finger. The noise of the room faded until there was only the sound of her heartbeat and his quiet smile. Later, as the lights softened and people surrounded them with congratulations, AJ whispered, "Do you remember that day at the café?" She laughed through tears. The day I nearly threw coffee at you? The best mistake I ever made, he said. That night, the world finally saw them not as a scandal, but as proof that honesty still mattered. And for the first time in a long time, Lena felt free. A few months later, spring arrived in the city with warm wind and the smell of rain-soaked earth. The headlines that once mocked Lena and AJ had long disappeared. What replaced them were stories about the Urban Cup Foundation's new program, one that funded independent cafes owned by low-income families. Lena was now the face of that program, and she carried the title with quiet pride. The gala incident had changed everything. For weeks, she had avoided reporters, cameras, and even AJ himself. The proposal had been overwhelming, so public, so unexpected. But what mattered most to her was not the applause that night, it was the way he kept his word afterward. He had stepped back, given her space, and let her choose what came next. When she finally met him again, it was at the same cafe where everything began. The place had been remodeled under the new foundation's support. The wooden tables gleamed under soft light, and a new sign hung above the counter, Honest Grounds. AJ was already there, sitting by the window with 2 cups of coffee. He looked different somehow, more relaxed, more human. She smiled nervously as she sat down. "You kept your promise," she said, glancing around. "So did you," he replied. "You turned honesty into a brand." They both laughed. And for the first time, there was no tension, no misunderstanding, just warmth. The hum of the espresso machine filled the air as sunlight streamed through the glass. He leaned forward. "Do you remember what you told me the first time we met?" Lena groaned, laughing. "That your coffee tasted like dishwater. I try not to remember." "That was the moment I knew I wanted to know you better," he said softly. "Not because you were wrong, but because you were brave enough to tell the truth." Her eyes softened. "I am not brave. I was just tired of pretending." He nodded. "Maybe that is what real courage looks like." They sat in silence for a moment, sipping coffee. Outside, the city moved as it always had: cars, people, noise, but between them there was a calm that felt unshakable. AJ reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small object wrapped in tissue. He placed it on the table. Inside was the same porcelain cup she had spilled coffee from months ago, now cleaned and repaired, its tiny cracks filled with silver like Japanese kintsugi art. "It reminded me of us," he said. "Flawed, but mended with honesty." Lena's throat tightened. "You kept it all this time?" "I told you, it was the best mistake I ever made," he said with a smile. She looked down at the cup, tracing the silver lines with her fingertips. "You still want to marry someone who once yelled at you in public?" "Especially her," he said. Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they were not from pain. "Then yes," she whispered, "but on one condition: our first cafe must serve the strongest coffee in the city." "Deal," he said, laughing. Weeks later, their wedding was small but beautiful, held in the courtyard behind Honest Grounds. No press, no suits, no flash. Just close friends, the aroma of roasted beans, and 2 people who had learned that love built on truth could withstand anything. As they stood together under the string lights, AJ raised his cup toward her and said quietly, "Here is to honesty." Lena smiled back, her eyes shining. "And to the courage it takes to live by it." The crowd cheered softly as they clinked their cups, sealing a promise not written in contracts or headlines, but in the small, ordinary kindness that had once changed both of their lives forever. 1 year later, the morning sun poured through the windows of Honest Grounds, now one of the city's most beloved coffee spots. The scent of roasted beans drifted through the air as customers chatted softly, unaware that the woman refilling their cups was the same one who had once stood in the middle of a scandal. Lena Carter moved with the same quiet grace she always had, her apron dusted with flour and her smile genuine. Life had changed, but not in the way she had expected. AJ still ran the Urban Cup Foundation, but he spent most mornings here, behind the counter, learning the craft he once only observed. His expensive suits had been replaced with rolled-up sleeves and coffee stains. When he burned his hand on the espresso machine, Lena teased him that he finally understood what real work felt like. He only laughed. Together, they built a place that reflected everything they had learned. A portion of every sale went to train young baristas from struggling backgrounds. The walls were covered in framed photos, local families opening their own shops, handwritten thank you notes, and one small golden-framed napkin that read, "Sometimes honesty is stronger than sweetness." It hung just above the register, the same note that had started it all. On the anniversary of the foundation's relaunch, they held a small community gathering at the cafe. The place was packed: customers, partners, and staff, who had all become family. AJ stood at the front, holding a microphone, looking at the crowd that had once only existed in his imagination. 1 year ago, he said, this place was just an idea built from a mistake and a spilled cup of coffee. But the truth is, everything meaningful I have now came from that mistake. It taught me that integrity is not just a word we print on banners. It is something we live every single day. Lena stood beside him, her hands clasped together, her heart swelling with pride. When the applause faded, he turned to her and added, "And it also taught me that love cannot be hidden behind titles or money. It grows best in the ordinary moments between two people who refuse to give up on each other." The crowd cheered again, raising their cups in a toast. Lena leaned toward him and whispered, "You are starting to sound like a poet." He grinned. Maybe honesty makes people poetic. Later, as the evening settled and the last guests left, they sat together on the front steps of the café. The city buzzed softly around them, a distant hum of cars and laughter. AJ wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Do you ever think about how it all began?" he asked. Lena smiled. "Every day, and I still cannot believe I yelled at you over a cup of coffee." "It was destiny in disguise," he said. She leaned her head on his shoulder, the neon sign of honest grounds glowing above them. "Do you think people will ever stop judging us by where we came from?" "Maybe not," he said quietly. "But that does not matter anymore, because the only thing that defines us is what we build together." The wind carried the smell of fresh coffee down the empty street as they sat there, two souls who had found truth not in wealth or status, but in compassion and courage. For them, love had never been about perfection. It was about honesty, strong, imperfect, and real. Like the first bitter sip of coffee on a cold morning that warms you from the inside out. 2 years later, Honest Grounds had grown from a single corner cafe into a movement that stretched across several cities. Every new shop carried the same mission: community first, profit second. Yet success always came with its own shadows. It began quietly. A few investors who had supported the Urban Cup Foundation were now demanding faster expansion, higher returns, and new branding. They said the story of the waitress and the millionaire had run its course. They wanted luxury. Lena refused. She told them that Honest Grounds was never meant to serve the elite. It was meant to give ordinary people a voice. One afternoon, while Lena was leading a workshop for new trainees, AJ received a message from the board. A meeting had been scheduled without him. When he arrived, the room was filled with sharp suits and cold stares. The senior investor, Mr. Grant, spoke first. "You have built something inspiring, AJ. But emotion does not sustain business. We have decided to rebrand the foundation. New leadership, new vision." AJ's jaw tightened. "And what happens to the staff, the families, the grants we promised?" "They will adapt," Grant said smoothly. "You are a businessman. You understand that stories fade. We must sell aspiration, not charity." That night, AJ returned to the cafe long after closing. Lena was still there, stacking chairs and humming to herself. She looked up when she saw his face. "What happened?" He hesitated before answering. "They want to take everything. The board plans to replace the foundation's leadership. They think we are too sentimental." Lena's expression hardened. "Then we will fight for it. You taught me that honesty is worth defending." He shook his head. This time it might not be enough. For days, they worked in silence, gathering documents, contacting allies, trying to find a legal way to protect their mission. The pressure was enormous. Rumors began to spread online that the couple was losing control of their company. Journalists camped outside the cafe, hoping for another scandal. During one particularly tense night, Lena found AJ sitting alone in the office, staring at the silver-lined cup she had once broken. "You cannot let them destroy what we built," she said. He looked up, exhaustion etched into his features. "They have power, money, and connections. I only have this." He held up the cup, a symbol of honesty. She placed her hand over his. "Then let us remind them why this symbol matters." A week later, at the annual foundation conference, hundreds of employees gathered expecting to hear about the leadership change. The investors took the stage first, announcing a new direction focused on premium markets. Just as the applause began, the lights dimmed, and a new video appeared on the giant screen. It was footage of the very first cafe, the day Lena had yelled at AJ, followed by images of every person whose life had changed through their foundation: baristas, single parents, veterans, and students. Then came the message. Honest Grounds was built by people, not money. Integrity is the only brand we believe in. When the lights came back on, AJ and Lena stood together on the stage. "If you want to take this company," AJ said to the investors, "you will have to take the people too, because they are honest grounds." The audience erupted in applause. One by one, employees and partners stood up, declaring their loyalty. The investors, realizing their power was slipping, had no choice but to back down. That night, under the same city lights that had once witnessed their first fight, AJ turned to Lena and said quietly, "You were right. Honesty was enough after all." She smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. It always is. Months after the confrontation with the investors, the storm had finally passed. The Urban Cup Foundation remained under AJ's and Lena's leadership, and Honest Grounds continued to thrive exactly as it was meant to: simple, kind, and rooted in truth. Yet even with their victory, both of them knew that peace was not the same as stillness. Growth always came with a price. The success of their mission attracted national attention. Newspapers called them the couple who changed corporate kindness. Requests poured in for interviews, partnerships, and expansions. AJ Tusi handled most of it with his usual calm, but Lena could sense that he was stretching himself too thin. He was working late again, sometimes sleeping in the office. When she brought him dinner one night, she found him hunched over a laptop, eyes red from exhaustion. "You promised not to lose yourself in this," she said gently. He leaned back with a tired smile. "I am fine, Lena. I just need to finish this proposal." She crossed her arms. "You once told me that coffee tastes better when it is not rushed. Maybe life does too." Her words hung in the air. He closed the laptop slowly. "You are right," he admitted. "I forgot what we fought for in the first place." They decided to take a break from the spotlight. For the next month, they traveled across the small towns that had joined the Honest Grounds network. They met café owners, listened to stories, and sipped cups of coffee brewed with love and pride. In those quiet moments, far from the boardrooms and headlines, they found themselves again. One afternoon, while visiting the first foundation-funded shop in a mountain town, an elderly woman handed Lena a handwritten letter. "Your story saved my grandson," she said softly. "He was going to give up on his dream, but when he read about you and your husband, he decided to try again." Lena held the letter close, her eyes filling with tears. That night, by the firelight of their small cabin, she read it aloud to AJ. Every word reminded them of how far they had come from a spilled cup of coffee to a life built on compassion. Later, as they sat outside under the clear sky, AJ reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded envelope. "I have something for you," he said. Inside was a sketch of a building, simple lines, large windows, warm light spilling out onto cobblestones. "Our next project," he said softly. "A school for hospitality and community leadership. Free training for anyone who wants a second chance." Lena looked at the drawing, her heart full. "A place to teach honesty," she whispered. He nodded. "A place to remind people that integrity still has value." She looked up at him, smiling. "You really believe we can build it?" "I do," he said. "Because every miracle we have had started with you believing first." The fire crackled between them as silence settled in a warm, comforting quiet that said more than words ever could. The mountains stood tall around them, the same way their love had endured every test. For the first time in a long while, Lena felt a calm certainty. Whatever lay ahead, she knew they would face it the same way they had faced everything else together, with open hearts and honest hands. As the night deepened, she whispered, "Do you remember that day at Harper Street Café?" AJ chuckled. "I could never forget. You told me my coffee tasted like dishwater." She laughed softly. "And you told me that was the best mistake you ever made?" They clinked their mugs together beneath the stars, a quiet toast to the journey that had turned one argument into a legacy of love and truth that would outlive them both. A full year later, the school that AJ had dreamed of stood proudly in the heart of the city. It was built from red brick and glass, surrounded by green gardens and laughter. The sign above the entrance read, "The Honest Grounds Academy." On the opening day, hundreds of people gathered: students, families, cafe owners, and old friends from every stage of Lena and AJ's journey. Lena stood by the doors, her hand linked with his. She had never seen him look so proud, not even at the galas or the press events. This time the pride was quiet, humble, earned. "You really did it," she whispered. "We did it," he said softly. "You and I, together." When the ribbon was cut, the crowd erupted in cheers. Cameras flashed, but this time Lena did not flinch. She had stopped caring what the world thought long ago. What mattered now were the faces in front of her: the young woman who had been homeless and now ran her own cafe, the veteran who learned to roast coffee to support his family, the students who were finally given a chance to dream. Every one of them was proof that kindness could build empires stronger than any fortune. As the ceremony ended, AJ led her inside. The lobby was warm, filled with the smell of roasted beans and new beginnings. On the main wall hung a framed photo of a coffee cup cracked and mended with silver. Beneath it, a small plaque read, "From the mess, we learned the meaning of truth." Lena touched the frame gently. "It feels like we have come full circle," she said. AJ smiled. "No, it feels like we are finally starting the real story." Later that evening, when the guests had left, they sat together on the rooftop terrace of the academy. The city lights shimmered below, a sea of gold and blue. The hum of traffic sounded distant, peaceful. Lena leaned against his shoulder, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "Do you ever think about what life would have been like if we had never met?" she asked. "I try not to," he said with a small laugh, "because every version without you feels unfinished." She smiled. "You always know what to say." He looked at her with quiet sincerity. "I learned from you. You taught me that the truth, even when it hurts, is the most beautiful thing we have." The wind carried the faint aroma of coffee from the courtyard below. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply watched the city they had helped change, alive and full of light. AJ reached for her hand and held it tightly. "When I first met you, I was pretending to be someone else," he said. "Now, I am finally who I was meant to be, because of you." Lena turned to him, her eyes bright with emotion. "And because of you, I learned that love does not need to be perfect. It just needs to be honest." He lifted her hand and kissed it gently. "Then let us keep being honest about everything." Below them, the sign of honest grounds glowed softly in the dark. The city moved forward, just as they did two hearts, bound by the simple truth that had once begun with a spilled cup of coffee and a single act of courage. As the night settled in, Lena whispered, "To honesty." AJ smiled, his voice steady. "To love." They clinked their cups together one last time, sealing a promise that would carry them through the rest of their lives, steadfast, sincere, and forever true.